It is an honor for us, for me, and for Sbunker to be hosting this event, the first ever talk that we are actually hosting, and which gave us the idea actually to host more, so thank you for that, Eric. I will not be giving a long introduction to Eric and what he does. Most of you have been able to read about him in our postings on social media, and the New Yorker article, and the Economist article. And Eric will be talking a lot about himself and what he does in his talk. What I wanted to do is, first of all, to thank people who are responsible for helping for this event. Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Petricelimi, who is now already ex-minister, or ex-acting minister of Foreign Affairs, also express for enabling the live stream of this event today. We would like to really thank them for that. We are extremely happy to have Mr. Jarosinski, or Jarosinski in the States.
Either one is fine.
Yeah. As Sbunker, because we feel he is in the right place in the right time. I was talking to him yesterday that social media is actually the media in Kosovo. It's actually mainstream media here. And this is also a country of a lot of failed intellectuals as well. So you are completely at home here. And I think we have a lot what to learn, and also what to teach you as well. I also got a message from Kren Argashi, who is our also co-founding editor of Sbunker, and I asked him to explain why we were the perfect host, and he wrote to me, and I'm going to read this, and he's probably watching from Belgium. When we started Sbunker, we thought of it as a blogging response to the mainstream. We are Sbunker because we are not a bunker. The S in our logo is conceptualized to represent the basic value of science, doubt, and the basic step towards critical thinking, negation. By negating the boxes, the clusters, the segments, and the divides we have kept on, we have been called a political blog, a feminist blog, an elitist blog, and so on, but we are not. Nein. We are all of that, and at the same time, when we negate the possibility to be constrained by labels. Care to explain? Nein. In the spirit of Nein. What I wanted to also add is, I had a very interesting discussion yesterday with Eric about our experiment as Sbunker. Last year we wanted to introduce this new genre of writing, which we call statuses, this short form, and it's exactly along the lines of what Eric is also trying to promote, a new genre that has built upon what social media is doing to social and political commentary in trying to address complex issues in a short format. So I think you're, as I said, in the right place at the right time, and I'll give the mic to Eric for his presentation, after which we will have a chance to ask questions and have hopefully a lively discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. If you excuse me, I actually have to walk to the bar because the cable is not going to reach quite far enough. But simply keep your eyes on the screen rather than me. I think that you'll find that more entertaining, perhaps. But we'll find out soon enough. And thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you for coming. Especially since it probably isn't entirely clear what a failed intellectual goodwill tour is, and I can't say that I've helped to explain that necessarily, except to say it's really an attempt to take a Twitter account on the road, which is something that I've been trying to do for the last year, sometimes successfully, sometimes abysmally poorly. It'll probably be a mixture of those things throughout the next few days as I make my way around a few places nearby. But generally, for the last couple of months, I've been spending a lot of time in Europe, which I know is undergoing a process of rethinking itself right now, its identity, and so on. I myself, over the last few weeks, have been thinking about what Europe has come to mean to me. Of course, we know it as a Greek startup, soon bought by Germany, then of course sold to Google. So that's my working definition right now of Europe, and we'll see what that looks like as I make my way through a few more places. But I am happy to see that in the last weeks and couple of months I've spent time in Europe. I think I have had a bit of influence, as I saw in a headline today. So I think that there's at least one accomplishment which I can take some pride in. And I know that you were advertised utopian negation, topped with Balkan-inspired political incorrectness. I don't know if I can necessarily live up to that. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but your politics are a little bit complicated here. At least they have that reputation for being somewhat complicated. I did attempt to learn something more than I usually am able to about the place before I came. I did have a little bit of trouble finding good sources. This looked like a great book, but I just wasn't sure about the author. I thought there might be an agenda in that. I was a little unsure of it, and I have to admit a lot of what I know about this part of the world I learned just very recently in visiting Albania. I very much wanted to go to Tirana. I've been seeing the ads for Albania for years all over the world, and I thought that I would finally go and visit. And it was hard to learn about Albania when you don't know much about it, and you arrive, but you do your best. But I was a little bit clueless, and certainly didn't know much about Tirana, and didn't know very much about Tirana's mayor who welcomed me to town. I had no idea who he was, and I was a little confused because when I arrived in Tirana at the airport, it was my impression that John Travolta was actually the mayor. So I was a little bit surprised when I received this direct message, happy to have you in town. And if you notice, you'll see it took me all of the whole night to the next morning to come up with that great response. That's wit in action. Right? I think that was the end of our conversation, actually, right there. In any case, people have been very eager to give advice and explain politics to me, all in their own way. I've received any number of pointers, long lists of who hates each other, who doesn't hate each other, and usually rather complicated, signed off simple as that, typically. But what I really have to do first, though, before I go into this anymore, is again to thank you for having me. And this happened primarily from my visit recently in Tirana, when someone remarked that Twitter isn't actually very popular at all in Albania, so it somehow seemed fitting that I should be visiting. So shortly thereafter, within the first couple of minutes after this tweet was written, someone else wrote to me very quickly and explained that in fact social media looks a little bit different here, the land of Snapchat, I was told. I didn't believe it myself because I know that there are no intellectuals who use Snapchat. That was proven to me the other day. Well, I checked out the website and I saw, well, in fact, maybe there are some possibilities for Snapchat, but I was happy to see that, in fact, my host tonight and moderator is, in fact, also something of a philosopher online. So I was very happy to see that in fact, there is a way. What I like most about this tweet is how many people feel the same way. That's really pretty delightful. So in any case, I had to do a little research and figure out who this man was who invited me, and I found out. Although I see today I actually had his title wrong. I believe it is the man of media is what I saw today, if that's correct. So I thought, okay, let's see if we can make this happen. So I started to Google around a little bit to learn something about what it is I should see and so on here. And I found a few good travel tips. Some of them were a little alarming, I found. I read it primarily on the plane on my way here. And I looked around, I found a few more things. I thought, okay, this could be a very interesting place. And read a little bit more, and I thought, oh fuck, Kosovo might be a very scary place. And I'll admit that, I was a little terrified. And that's why I was very relieved when I got to the airport and I arrived and I realized that no, I was in Kosovo. So I would not recommend Kosovo from what I have read. Kosovo seems like a lovely place. And it's been great for me the last couple of days. I had a great flight in, of course. I had a little bit of trouble with my first taxi from the airport. But then I finally did make my way. I'm not always the most talented tourist, and I was so fortunate. I found a taxi driver, Rifi, who the love of his life is in Dusseldorf 20 years ago and wanted nothing but to speak German. So we had a long philosophical conversation on the way from the airport, and we had a great time. So things started off extremely well for me, and I was very, very happy to be here. I was a little disappointed already in the way in. I saw that your beautiful city is already overrun by American tourists. I think that's a bit of a shame. We're not always the best visitors. I have to admit. No, I know who that is. That's Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton. Partially, I think that maybe you're a little on her particular side when it comes to this current election. I know that the Clintons are very well known here. So I was quite happy to see that you also have a statue to Bernie Sanders. So I appreciated that a lot. I mean, in his younger days, he was a little younger than me. But that's what Rifi told me, Bernie Sanders. Well, I honestly have tried to learn a little bit, and I have to say this publication has helped me a lot. I've read a fair amount. In fact, even Agon has a very interesting piece in it about nostalgia for Yugoslavia. I thought was really fascinating. And in general, though, I've mainly been learning things by paging through some publications, walking around. I'm happy to see the exciting things happening here. The new German embassy looks like it's going to be really, really nice. The old one looked a little run down to me. I wasn't quite sure about that. You want to move over a little so you can see. And lots of exciting things happening. I saw just very recently in The Guardian some very good news about your football team, soccer team. Just the last couple of days, I've been impressed by how lively the streets are, the festival that I've seen going on, this event, which I thought was very cool. I also read some very good news. You'll be getting new buses soon, perhaps, I saw. Interesting too, some folks here told me about the emerging culinary scene that you're very proud of. I've seen a fair amount of that. Contemporary art seems to be very strong here as well. Happy about all of these things. So far I've been most impressed by a visit yesterday. It came up out of nowhere, very last minute, to Hackerspace. Some of you know the Hackerspace, right? Know this gentleman who showed me around. Learned a fair amount about what it is that they're doing. Fascinating project. In my time over the last weeks, I've been realizing in many ways how much technology has come from this part of the world, have been further developed recently. In Sofia, actually in Bulgaria, I realized that it was in fact a Communist Party functionary who was responsible for inventing the mouse pad. I was very impressed by that, and of course also the selfie stick. Very impressed by this at the museum. I can recommend it. Their project is, of course, this DIY book scanner right here, and it was I was present for an historic moment, the scanning and transcription of, I think, what is the first book, or one of the early ones, right? This is, in fact, syntax, right? It's Albanian syntax, and you scan it through, and you get it read with an OCR, right? Which is a lot of trouble to read. But I was most impressed about these guys was, in fact, they're not just software, they're very much hardware based. I saw this throughout. These are people who work with tools, work with their hands. They're good materialists, was my sense there. I was very impressed by that. They're also real dialecticians, I realized as well, by taking a look at some of their reading material, good capitalism, bad capitalism. But it's also interesting, it's clear they know their stuff, that they're reading Hegel very carefully. This is one of the few times when I saw Hegel's collected works organized as they should be, with the thesis, the antithesis over to the right, and then your synthesis in the middle. So I was very impressed by that. And in general, by the spirit that these folks show in terms of the work they're doing and how hard they're working. Lots of inspirational messages throughout that I myself was also very inspired by. This one probably the most, actually. I like that because I think in many ways that's been a little bit of the spirit of what it is that I've been doing. And I tried to think through what it is I've been doing just to sort of introduce it to a number of you who haven't followed online or not. How many of you are not on Twitter at all? Probably a lot of you, right? Oh, and how many of you are? Oh, wow. Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's more than usual. I'm surprised. All right. Right now, American college students, for instance, I'll ask, and no one is on Twitter at all. It's become for their parents or for their former professors who now started careers on Twitter. So I tried to think about what it is that I'm doing in terms of hacking, taking something that exists and somehow interrupting it and perhaps repurposing it, which I think is a word that's being used now, maybe even improving it in some form. So I tried to think about what I'm doing maybe as hacking philosophy. So I'm here to try to give some inspiration back from what I got yesterday to make the case that this has been what's impressed me most about the little bit of travel that I've done in the Balkans over the last year. Are people who are working extremely hard to do as much as they can with a little. And I've been impressed by the spirit of innovation that I've seen, and cool people, simply. Lots of young people very tempted to leave, make their way to Silicon Valley or other things, and decide to see what they can make of where they are at home. So that's something I've been impressed by. My own idea of hacking philosophy, as I was trying to think about it, as you know, philosophy is the love of wisdom or knowledge or of learning. I myself am a little bit less from philosophy, however. I've already hacking it to the extent of working more in the realm of theory, which, as you know, is the love of theory. And more specifically, my realm is that of critical theory, the love of using highly enigmatic Walter Benjamin quotations to make a highly obvious point. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the work of critical theory, the Frankfurt School that I've worked on the most. Much of it working very much with ideas that come from Marx, but also Hegel, Freud, and others. And that philosophical basis stays very much part of my own project. A lot of what I taught when I was a professor was Marx. And in fact, I've tried then to keep that to some extent without necessarily being too stuck in my own academic life. There are various readings of Marx that make their way into what it is that I'm doing. There's the radical reading of Marx that some of you are familiar with if you've spent any time studying Marx. There's also, of course, the reactionary reading of Marx, you might know. Some of you are probably also familiar with the revisionist reading of Marx. I do my best to concentrate on the realistic reading of Marx. So what does that translate into? I guess I've called this little project that I've been doing from the beginning, utopian negation, sort of as a joke, but not only as a joke. And this is how I've defined it in this little 4-line format that I've developed coming from Twitter into print. I know that's a little abstract, that definition. My favorite way of illustrating this, as always, I can't go a day without studying my favorite allegory of utopian negation, which many of you, of course, know, so I won't bore you with it for too long. You've all seen this too many times. But it is important for me to make clear that this is an allegory of utopian negation, is what this is. Yeah, when I last showed this recently in Sofia, as a German firm was there, and the 2 little kids saw it, and they got very angry at this penguin for pushing the other one into the water. Very, very angry about that. But that was just not right. So, what is it that is possible as a result of taking something like philosophy, hacking it, if you will, trying to find another language for it, another form, etc.? Well, a lot of it is sort of seeking a new type of genre, a new type of audience, a new type of engagement with philosophical thought. For me, it's also turned into, in many ways, opening doors to realms of culture I didn't have any access to in the past. I mean, as an academic, I became more and more isolated in my existence. I don't think it necessarily has to be that way, but that's the way it worked for me. Turning this into something online made it possible to form a great number of connections that I valued. Recently turned into a book project as well. A book, though, it's not just one book, and this is kind of where, again, the difficulties start once you hack something like philosophy, especially something like the work of a Theodor Adorno, which is whose face it is that graces the covers of this book, a major critic of what he referred to as the culture industry. Even if you've never read any of the work of Adorno or Horkheimer or others in the Frankfurt School, you've heard that term, and extremely influential, also, of course, criticized in any number of ways in the many decades since its formulation. But for me, of course, I've now taken ideas that have come from a type of critical theory of the world, which is very much about not simply understanding it, but changing it in some form or another, and turned it into something of a product. This is a commodity, right? And there's going to be a tension in that, and it's been a little bit difficult to navigate at times. Early on, the tour is rather low budget. Once you have a wealthy German publisher, you get new transportation, which does make things a little more comfortable. You can lose sight of your roots and what you were doing. And of course, once you're dealing with a large publisher, they have ideas for you as well about how you can increase your market. They like the idea of Nein, but they thought you might want to soften your tone a little bit. There's more money to be made in self-help, I was told. And if you really want to make money, you need to appeal to the American market, I was told as well. So I did the best I could. But tried not to forget the work of Adorno's own radical criticism. And in fact, one could talk about it at length, but my favorite illustration is the start of a famous interview with him in the magazine Der Spiegel. Herr Professor, vor 2 Wochen erschien die Welt noch in Ordnung, so roughly Mr. Professor, Herr Professor, up until a couple of weeks ago, it seemed as if everything was the way it should be, right? The world was in order, literally. His answer, which was to me also, again, inspiring, he in a way hacked the introduction to this interview by responding, not to me, yeah, mir nicht. And this is the first time Adorno made me laugh, and also what I was impressed by, in fact, that extremely brief but well-timed formulation that also said so much about a much larger philosophical position, which of course he goes on to articulate in various ways. So I have tried to, in whatever way I can, maintain the critical spirit of the work of Adorno, and tried the best I can to fight against any cheapening of his ideas through commodification by, say, your publisher's merchandising department. Had any number of ideas But I've tried to resist them as much as I can, and tried not to cheapen a cultural tradition and working on what I'm doing. Those of you who follow the account online know that this painting by Caspar David Friedrich, The Wanderer, makes frequent appearances in various forms over time. Valentine's Day, always very popular to have a romantic artist. But also just any other time as well. You might, and this is again a moment of tension, a moment of ambivalence of, I'm taking something that has great meaning to me and to many others, and in fact I'm playing with this. Can I do that? Should I be doing that? The answer to that, after a lot of thought, is in fact yes. Although this is not mine. This is simply floating out there on the internet, as is this, which is probably the most ingenious version of Der Wanderer for some time. What Adorno himself would think about this is probably pretty clear. Fortunately, I've found there have been at least some thinkers who are willing to let philosophy be hacked. Primarily someone in Ljubljana who's taking a liking to what I do. I know that he's very popular here. I saw a very long line yesterday to get tickets for Zizek. The line stretched a very long way. I was very impressed by that. So I know there are fans. I won't go through various examples of dumb Zizek jokes, but it's become a bit of a genre for me. In many ways, Zizek is someone who I greatly admire much of what he's done and much of what he's made possible for the way in which philosophy has made its way into realms that it might not have otherwise. And to me, that's again part of a spirit of hacking philosophy that I very much respect. And of course, much of what I like about Zizek in general is, in fact, is a certain questioning of the authority of theory, which is something that matters to me a great deal. Is in fact trying to make it clear that it's not necessarily a matter of wielding theory as a weapon against others who are also interested in theory but do not know as much. But in fact, this should be in a way something that's possible for others to engage with, not necessarily by making it, dumbing it down or somehow simplifying, but simply through making it clear that there is in fact a type of engagement with philosophical ideas that are part of your everyday lives, that we're doing that all the time anyway, but there might be better ways to think and better tools for thinking. But certainly my own little campaign against a certain theory snobbery makes its way into a lot of what I do, however, in whatever form that I can find. The other thing to address, hacking philosophy, but also I want to encourage you to think about hacking social media. It sounds like many of you are doing this already. For me, that means, in fact, recognizing the possibilities that exist with social media that might not be readily apparent. Some people, for instance, have no idea why you would ever want to have anything to do with Twitter. I try to make it clear what it is that one can find there. And of course, one has to appreciate the historical context of something like Twitter as well. This is an unprecedented opportunity. Recently at a conference of a Wired magazine in which content and culture were discussed, primarily actually in the form of GIFs. This is one of the people in charge of Giphy, a company that you might know, and very interesting to hear his thoughts about the expressive potential of a GIF versus words, culture greater than words. Very interesting, kind of provocative thesis, actually. In fact, he was making the case that soon we will be communicating a great deal with one GIF to express something, and another GIF is the response, which in fact is already happening. Of course, right? I used to see a lot of it on Twitter, but more and more in messaging and so on. They've recently set up a studio in Los Angeles producing GIFs, etc. So I learned a great deal about that. But a lot of what this has been about for me is hacking something like Twitter. I like its simplicity, its limitations. And this is what we talked a lot about yesterday. It's what made it possible for me to write was, in fact, that I could only write so much. And that a tweet never came with any great authority. A tweet doesn't have footnotes. A tweet is in a way a form that you can use to say something with, but at the same time, it's never going to come instantly with the type of authority that, say, your seminar paper might, or your academic article, whatever it happens to be. And that's for good reason. But at the same time, for me, it's a matter of what is it that you can actually do with words to say something about culture, but do so differently? How can you actually combine the culture and the words? Are very hard to separate, as anyone might imagine. But I think what's been most important for me is, in fact, finding a bit of a genre for social media that would work. I work roughly within the realm of comedy, a classic definition, not my own, tragedy plus time. Twitter comedy is a little different, tragedy plus time minus time. But what I do, German Twitter comedy is different as well, tragedy plus time minus comedy, plus fart jokes, plus Hegel, minus Hegel. That's the theory, anyway, that I've been working on over time, and it takes different forms, so that's where I am right now. The practice turns into tweets that are about any number of different things. Sometimes they can get a little bit gloomy, a little bit hopeless, a little bit kind of depressing, I admit that. Oops, sorry, that one's not mine. But in fact, a lot of them, in fact, stick to, I've said many times, I still believe it, the best tweet by an acting pope. Right here, the very best tweet by an acting pope. But try to address the things, again, that I was interested in talking about in a very different context of academic life. But I try to address that then also in this new form with new limitations. And to me, though, it's meant sticking to a lot of the same subjects. Like, for instance, the beauty of the German language I write a fair amount about. Some people find German to be very inflexible. I try to make it clear that it's not. Some people think German words are very long. Some people, some people think that German is somehow just too difficult to understand. I try to make it clear that's not the case. Some people seem to think that German is very difficult to learn, and try to make it clear it's not. And in fact, if you do start to learn, there are some easy tips that will help you to learn as well. But it's easy to make umlaut jokes. It's harder to go about hacking philosophy within the realm of social media with its limitations. But you try. The most important thing, though, is not to lose the nuance of philosophical thought. And so I try very hard to be, in fact, accurate, make good arguments to the extent I can about any number of points in philosophical thought that are not necessarily easily explained, but certainly not just the German tradition, French tradition as well, of course, other intellectuals from other parts of the world as well. But there are no jokes about philosophy also online, not only in a seminar room, without an understanding of basic philosophical terms and categories. And that is something that I try my best as well always to make clear. But I should tell you at this point, it would be a lie to say that Twitter is always this intellectual. It's not. That's not what Twitter is. So. I need to wrap up soon, but one of the final categories that I talk about, ultimately, for me, language is at the heart of everything, and it's about hacking language in a way. I write about languages any number of times and try to think through what languages are and what they mean to us, and try to define them in various ways, whether it be Italian or French or German. Or in fact also Albanian. I've tried the best I can. I am very curious how one pronounces this, I must say. And I try, of course, not to forget my own language as well. And I was very happy to see that here there are probably the most important word has in fact already made its way into the language, and I have to say I appreciate that spelling very much. But what that turns into to a great extent is also hacking culture when you're dealing with language. And a lot of what I do is a back and forth between German culture and US culture, Europe and the United States. Sometimes you do see headlines like this. Many Germans think poorly about America, which I can understand. But you can also fix that pretty quickly as well. There are often a lot of tensions because of questions of privacy, NSA issues, etc., things I write a lot about. Germans don't always get the best treatment in the United States, as I saw recently in Chicago. Where I'm from, Wisconsin, the Midwest, lots of Germans immigrated in the 19th century, really left their mark on the place. This is the house I grew up in. And so I've tried my best to take that hacking of language and try to, in fact, promote the things that I believe in with a type of marketing language the best I can, and try to make the case for why you might want to learn a language like this, or why you might want to learn something like Swiss German, or why Austrian. Sometimes you do get that wrong in the beginning, but you try. But I have to say, my hacking of language has also led to the worst possible pun and a lasting monument in New York City. You can visit this if you want in Greenwich Village. Again, here I did have a better idea for that one. So I was going to conclude now by trying to give you something back to thank you for the great time I've had here for the last few days. And that's my last category, which might interest you right now. It's called hacking bad press. So I see that process is already underway. There was a letter today I saw, or maybe yesterday in the New York Times. I don't remember who wrote it. Some guy I'm told used to have a bar, someone or another. And I was trying to think, how can you hack bad press? Well, you need to counter it in a way that makes another case, that draws attention to the rest of the story that isn't being told. A lot of people don't understand how beautiful the weather is here, for instance. I don't think that makes any appearance in that New York Times article. So I would suggest, for instance, maybe a slogan something a little bit like this. This could work, right? That's a possibility. The other thing, certainly, this is a place which is all about tremendously fundamental changes and transitions and debates. A very young country, very much a question of democratic structures that are still coming together. You could highlight that as being a draw as well. There are also just ways in which you can make the case that people might not know you yet, but they'll like you when they get to know you, and I think that's another important point you might try to draw out, or of course you can also just go with the simpler approach as well. But I don't know. It's all up to you. You're going to have to decide. But you might take a lesson from Las Vegas and adopt something like this. This is kind of a double approach, though. This is a two-sided one. You've got to start with that, and then of course you need the punchline, which is this right here. Those are just a few suggestions. I know it's not easy. You're going to have problems in dealing with that. It's always hard to get your message out. I myself know this. I'm constantly struggling in terms of getting the word of utopian negation out. There are a lot of factors that sometimes get in the way. But I would simply encourage you not to lose heart. Keep hacking whatever it is you're hacking. Thank you, and auf Wiedersehen. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Eric. Not that bad. I don't know how to actually proceed. How to follow up on that, really. You talked about, touched upon a lot of other things. One of the things that actually or at least maybe two of the things we also discussed yesterday, that I think is also could be maybe interesting to start off our conversation here today is this issue of the authority of philosophy and of theory. I think you called it theoretical snobbery or something like that, or yeah. How can people take philosophy too seriously? I mean, according to me, sometimes. I mean, seriously in this more formal kind of way. And we as Sbunker found it very difficult to get people to write in this new short format, for example. The moment we would ask them to write shortly, and we're noticing now that people have short attention spans and they want to get things in quick sound bites, and how to get people engaged in this format without, and sort of to overcome this barrier that you have to write long. That philosophy has to be, you have to elaborate thesis, you have to have those footnotes. What kind of advice could you give to people to sort of to us to overcome that barrier of seriousness?
Well, I'm kind of divided on that, because in some ways I know that doing real philosophy is in fact serious work, and it's very difficult work. And even though I've been referred to in news stories and so on as sort of a Twitter philosopher, and so I don't think of what I'm doing as actually being philosophy at all. That's a very different enterprise, I think. What I'm interested in doing is engaging with philosophy in some form, and again, try to make that point, not necessarily popularizing or explaining as much as demystifying, I guess you could say. And what that means is, in fact, questioning the authority of philosophical forms, philosophical language, etc., while also making the case that that is, in fact, taking it seriously. That you could say that you're dealing with a certain false binary if you're talking about taking seriously or not seriously by either writing short or long, whatever it happens to be. That, in fact, it might be taking the work of critical thinkers the most seriously if, in fact, you're willing to be critical in dealing with their work in a way that isn't simply calling upon the authority of a Nietzsche, of an Adorno, of a Baudrillard, but in fact, you're going to embrace their own critical spirit in working with their own text, right? And I think that happens, but I think that it only happens once people have a sense that that is okay to do. One of Benjamin's notions is that of Walter Benjamin to be, I think it's, now my memory is getting so fuzzy, but to stick to tradition often means, in fact, to violate tradition. I mean, that's very much in that spirit. For me, I guess I would say that I'm not trying to cheapen or discount philosophical thought, critical thought, but trying in a way to encourage an engagement with it. But I also know that what I do online is not a replacement for the type of work that one needs to do to actually profit from. Because for me, at least, I cursed myself many, many times as a student, graduate student, assistant professor for dealing with thinkers that I found so hard to understand and so difficult to read. But I also realized that what I got out of their work was, in fact, the difficulty of that engagement. So that's something I would never want to see replaced. But what I would like to see, at least, is, in fact, a sense that philosophy is there for us and not the other way around. That, in fact, there is something that is accessible, and accessible, again, not meaning simple, but meaning relevant. There's something relevant in a lot of these things that you don't necessarily have to be an expert on to profit from in some form or another. Or, in fact, when there's someone who's sort of lording a greater knowledge of philosophy theory over someone else, that's a very disappointing moment for me, because that's when, as a professor, it was always the challenge was, how do I now translate this discussion into something that more people can engage with, and if they can engage with it, we're actually going to have better ideas come out of it, right? And so to me, this has all simply been sort of a process of, in a way, acknowledging the difficulties of a lot of these thinkers, acknowledging that, in fact, it's very hard to read Hegel, acknowledging that, in fact, though we know Marx is very important, there aren't that many people who have read all that much Marx firsthand as much as sort of secondhand through other thinkers, etc. So in a way, it's kind of an appeal towards a type of honesty, but also kind of making clear that that's allowed, if you can create the context for that.
Okay. Anybody? Like, I'd open the floor now for questions from the audience. Who would like to start?
Well, we can talk about anything you want to,
yeah.
Whether it be about social media or writing or whatever it is. I just do not have a nuanced understanding.
Over there. I don't think we can send the mic, but like we can hear you.
I'll break the ice.
No, it's fine.
So in Kosovo, we're bombarded with utopia all the time, and I was looking for the time of this event, and I couldn't find it because it was on Facebook. It's not on Twitter. Until yesterday, I think.
Okay.
So, and we know that the Facebook dictator there, gives you only positive news because he doesn't like negativity. And it's the same in Kosovo. So how do we combat that?
I don't know. It's interesting. I'm not exactly sure because in some ways, in some ways it seems to me as if perhaps simply exploring, other platforms, which are all going to have their own limitations, obviously, etc. But this is an interesting thing that I'm not familiar enough with yet. The idea that social media is, as you put it, your mainstream media, right? That is typically not the way in which I myself use social media. In fact, the interesting experience in the United States, what I know, is that social media provides very cheap content for established media. It's very hard to go through an entire news broadcast or more than a couple of pages of a newspaper without essentially reporting of what's the discussion online. And that's important, that matters, I understand that. But often there is a way in which reporting about the discussion sort of becomes the story itself as well, which it is. But the thing that I always want to see happen is, in fact, this combination of not simply covering that discussion, but in fact combining that with the kind of work that people who know issues well can do, can kind of point to various narratives surrounding contentious issues and bring them up there. For me, I would say that I have very little to do with Facebook. The account that I have on Facebook is simply a private account to try to keep up with what my nieces and nephews are doing, because I have no idea. Everyone else in my family knows. I have no idea. Facebook never appealed to me for various reasons. I know now you can, and for years now, tailor sort of which groups receive messages and so on. But for me, I never wanted to use Facebook because I thought there's no way for me ever to write something that I want my work, my colleagues, my students, my family, my friends to read, which was the case for a long time, if I understand it, on Facebook. And so I would say that primarily it's a matter of using a medium that is in fact set up with its own biases, with its own agendas.
I don't care about Facebook actually.
Okay.
It's what Kosovo is, it's Facebook. So how do we negate utopia in general? Kosovo.
In general?
Yeah. In society. It doesn't matter what we do.
Well, if you're going to ask that general question, I can only give you a very general answer. And to me, what it's about primarily is, in fact, asking what are the utopian promises that are being made, right? And asking yourself the question then of how is there any way in which that promise could ever be fulfilled, and what would fulfilling that promise actually look like? For me, social media in general is about a language of connection, a language of networks, a language of broader and broader connections between people, exchanges of information. But for me personally, social media is also about a new form of isolation. And I can only speak from my own perspective on this. I'm not a theorist of social media, except to say that I found that the more time that I became invested in something like Twitter early on, the more fragile my connections came outside of something like Twitter. The less, in fact, that I found myself going to older forms of media in which you have reporting that's done in a very different way, etc. So I would say that what I've seen primarily is something like a project that I've that I've seen grow up a little bit over the last year in Greece, for instance, an independent media project. And the context might be somewhat similar, I don't know, but as it's explained to me, you're working in media, you're either working for an oligarch or you're working for a political party. Independent media, extremely difficult, right? So for them, it's largely been Facebook and Twitter are in fact the mechanisms for audience, for distribution, right? But they're deliberately trying to address the pitfalls and problems of the media that exists out there right now. This is the space for them for an alternative, right? I don't know to what extent that translates into an experience here, but for them it's very difficult this way because they've just had a big crowdfunding campaign. Crowdfunding is difficult anywhere. Independent journalism is expensive. Crowdfunding in Greece right now extremely difficult. But it also is the possibility of the kind of reach, the broad reach, to make that possible, to have money come in from all kinds of places. That in fact would allow then for a specific transformation of a media environment because you have that broad reach, whereas often the broadness of communication, the kind of people you reach, the numbers of people you reach, can also mean a sacrifice in the type of engagement people have with what they're reading. I think in general, political organizing that takes place online often has the problem of it can reach, and this is different than your question, but for me it's related in a way. It's that you can have reach a great many people, but the type of investment, the type of engagement you have is not going to be the same as the kind of old school organizing that labor unions have done for a long time, with the conversation, the long tortuous meeting, etc., which in fact has its advantages in the type of engagement you have and the type of thinking that take place. So I'm sorry, I don't have a very good answer for you except to say that the use of an established mechanism in some critical way, to the extent that that's possible, and I don't have the answer to what that is, but that would be my very general sense of it.
By negating Utopia, are you trying to preserve the critical potential that it has, or the importance that it had in intellectual thought?
Usually I don't take it all that seriously, but in a way that is part and parcel, I suppose, of why it matters to me. This is partially why I'm hesitant to make grand theorizations of the internet around society and etc. I'm still at the phase at which this is a very personal project for me, and came about primarily from the fact that I had sort of lost the engagement that I had with critical thought, the joy in it actually, what made me want to study these things. All of a sudden it's kind of awful to become alienated from work which is critiquing alienation, right? But this happens, and it happened to me at least. So for me it was a matter of the rediscovery of a certain critical potential in something that doesn't necessarily look all that critical or all that serious, right? And it's not supposed to look serious. But the other thing that happens, and again, I guess I would say something about the mechanism here. Once you have a certain audience, and of people who have found each other because they both like the same terrible Hegel pun, right? You can have then thousands of people who somehow come together because of something that stupid, right? But I have also seen people form associations, networks that have done something, or have been able to contribute to something important because somehow they just got in the same space together. That's not an automatic thing, though. I mean, that to me is sort of all about a certain type of potential, but not its immediate realization. I mean, a lot of what it is that I, again, jokingly formulate in talking about the internet is that the internet connects us all to the internet. I mean, to what extent do those connections actually go beyond that in some way in which we can realize projects that we want to realize that are difficult, they take time, they're arduous, they're not filled with immediate satisfaction. So for me, if anything, if there's any grander ambition behind what I'm doing, it's perhaps a type of solidarity among people who are struggling with some of the same questions. But I don't think that what I do provides any answers whatsoever, apart from a type of engagement that says, you can deal with serious questions in a way that also takes them seriously by bringing them into a new context that's going to create a certain tension that sometimes results in a laugh, sometimes it doesn't. Or for instance, you know, again, it's this dumb Hegel puns that got me enough audience to make my way into a newspaper publication. That's access I never would have had without that. And I comment on just primarily German US politics every week. That wouldn't have been possible without that. But it's also done in this radically reduced form, right? In which, again, there's as much truth in some truth or insight in what it is that I'm doing in these little 4 lines about a complex political issue as a poem is true or false. I mean, it works in another sphere and another register, but primarily it's about what can be done with a little, and it's largely about taking established sort of talking points or an established political rhetoric and trying to take it apart in a radically reduced way. And in doing so, creating a type of textual cartoon, like a political cartoon that we know graphically, but working at the level of language. So again, the idea would be that of taking something that's established and seeing in what way you can turn it against itself.
Somebody else have any questions, comments? Yep, over there.
Maybe only briefly relevant, but I was wondering what you think about personalization and the filters that are available to us online. So I think it's awesome that
Can you speak out?
I think it's awesome that we can connect with like-minded people that click the button, but with Google kind of filtering search results behind the scenes by what it thinks will be interesting,
Right.
are we at risk of being surrounded by mirrors that are essentially echoing what we think, especially somewhere that's kind of isolated like this?
Yeah, I think that's probably a well-known phenomenon. I mean, it's largely what discussion about this all the time in terms of the German context, continually discussion of our filter bubble and how we escape from that and to what extent that's possible, etc. But I would say in particular that idea of filtering, arranging information, the power of various algorithms that work behind the scenes, that's a very real issue. And in fact, what has to happen right now, I think, are people who are good at reporting on those things and taking apart a lot of that, what seems like very highly complex technological stuff and translating it into the social, political implications of those things. Because largely I think that again, once those algorithms become visible and the assumptions that are encoded into them become visible, that is the last thing that a Google wants to happen, that Amazon wants to happen, because in a way, all of those, the DNA essentially of how your platform is operating and what it wants to achieve becomes visible in some way that it might not normally be, right? And so I think that is an example of something where, yes, there's definitely that danger, I think that's happening right now, and it happens very real ways. I mean, there was an interesting piece in a Columbia Journalism Review that I happened upon by chance a couple of months ago, largely asking that question, how can we critically report on algorithms? Like, we don't have an algorithm beat yet, but we're going to need something like that. And largely, you look at the definitions of what algorithms do, and it's pretty close to a lot of theorists' definitions of ideology, in a way, of what is, in fact, the assumption about how we want the world to work, how we want a platform to work, how do we make that happen, how do we reinforce the process to get the outcomes that we want to get, etc. So I think that's, again, an area in which I think you're right to point to the dangers of it. In that particular article, I'm forgetting the author's name right now. I mean, she points to the very real questions of discrimination, for instance, in getting an Uber, I think, like how long you're waiting, or things like this. I mean, very real, concrete consequences. But again, buried in code that we need people to be able to understand and translate into a language that actually makes those questions of power ideology clear, I suppose. But I'm obviously not that person.
Somebody else? Follow-ups, questions?
Okay, I have one. Like, I was talking earlier about the philosophy and theory and as having this authority and sort of instructing political action. Sometimes for social mobilization, its negation is in a way problematic, because theory and this theorizing provides framing for social movements. How can this hacking project, how does it help, for example, the political mobilization? How can it be put to use, the approach, your kind of project? You mentioned solidarity among people on small bits and pieces of issues, but if you can elaborate a little bit more on that, on the practical implications.
Well, this won't be a satisfactory answer, except to say that for myself, I see it functioning this way. Sometimes there are projects that I believe in, some initiative that I want to support, and again, this is the kind of thing that an Adorno and so on would certainly frown upon, but I want to, in fact, I see, for instance, a lot of the stuff that I've tried to work on online the last couple of years has had questions around privacy issues and technology, etc. And again, the big problem with that is it's a long-term issue, right? There's a fatigue that sets in very quickly. One revelation after another about from Snowden, etc. And there's an uproar briefly, but how does one sustain action of some sort? How does one, in fact, organize around those things? And for me, what it's meant, and this is very practical, but has meant trying to think in a way, what is a very short formulation, clever formulation of complex issues that are never ever going to do the job of explaining the issue. But to me, it's important, at least in the medium that I'm working in, Twitter, or this very brief little column in a paper, to at least, again, draw attention to, yes, but it's already on people's minds, but it's also a way of kind of reframing, I suppose, in a way that also demonstrates, this is really going to sound so silly, but critique is fun, right? I mean, there is an element too of we need to sustain some energy on if we're talking about a long-term project of any sort, and also essentially to somehow break through a certain type of fatigue as well. And so for me, what it means very concretely has been the attempt at times, old-fashioned sloganeering. Like, what's a three, 4-word thing, that I can come up with that might be of some use to something that I want to support, right? And sometimes those things get picked up, sometimes they don't. But for me, that's often part of the challenge. And I would say if there's any kind of hacking involved there, and again, this is only the way I've started to think about it since yesterday, just kind of for my own little experiment to think about it, is largely I'm working with the language of marketing throughout. I'm working with the rhythms of marketing, the type of formulations that are typically selling you Coke or Pepsi or some new app, whatever it is. But what I'm trying to do in a way is to recognize, yeah, we might all hate that language at some level, but it also is extremely effective on another. So is there a way to again, transform what it is that language is doing? Can you use that language in some other way? And that is a very real issue, though, because I've had this discussion with any number of people dealing with things politically. Most recently in Austria, the election for president there, and I was very much on the side of the guy who won eventually. But it was very much a debate about how can you organize against a political opponent in a way that's very effective, right? That isn't too much of a compromise in terms of your own political ideals about understanding issues and engaging with them in a meaningful way and so on. Because I understand the tensions there and the problems there, but I guess for me it's about what is the right way to formulate a message for a particular medium, etc. And so in a way, I guess that would be the most practical example of something that I do. But the other side of it is simply that of, in all of the things that I'm writing, trying to both often say something, right, but without the posture of, and I know better than everybody else, right? I mean, that's to me the real trick, is sort of, I don't want to be sanctimonious, I don't want to be reactionary, I don't want to be any of those things, and to me the trick of it, for me, and it's about my own thinking, you know, when I'm sitting there trying to formulate this 4-word, 5-word little thing, is how can I both indicate that there's a point of view that's being expressed, but that point of view invites criticism, right? It invites it. And if you're going to have an argument with that point of view, you're having an argument with a cartoon character in some ways, right? And that's an interesting position of working through those various layers of irony and so on. But that is what I try. What appeals to me about the short text as a form is how do you get many different levels, not necessarily of meaning, like these things are so deep. How do you simply generate enough pop, you know, of the power of the contradictions at work that makes someone enjoy, you know, the classical philosophical aphorism, whatever. And it usually consists of very simple elements. They're very simple oppositions that become formulated in new ways throughout. My favorite thing to do online is to take the same sentence, the same little thing, the same. I work with Magritte's, you know, this is not a pipe a lot. I haven't done it for a while, but there are probably 500 different versions of ways in which you can take that apart and do something different with it. And that's, I guess, what appeals to me, and certainly not explicitly political much of the time, but I think that type of thinking that I've been trying to learn from something like Twitter does have its political dimension, for me at least, personally.
Some more questions from the audience? Yes, over there at the end. If you can just speak out.
Yeah. Just going back to something you mentioned earlier, when you said that the internet is connecting people, but it's connecting people to the internet. I just don't see how that can be true when events like these, especially in Kosovo, you wouldn't get people here unless it was, you know, because of Facebook or Twitter or even Snapchat, whatever. So are you using some other sort of definition for connection, or?
Again, this is from my personal experience. The connection of my experience with Twitter has been a lot. This might not surprise you to know that my account draws a lot of depressed people, a lot of depressed, lonely people, which is why I started doing it. I was depressed and lonely, and I still am much of the time. And I found a certain type of community there, right? And you could talk about this at any number of different levels. The level at which I was speaking about it just now is that of also the whether one can ever actually find that community that you're seeking. That it gives you something, but it has its limits, right? And we all know that. That's obvious. Everyone's experienced that. But I know that for myself, it's something I've had to develop is enough distance from the medium that I'm also very engaged in because of a loss of connection. And what we're doing right now, taking this thing on the road was not an obvious thing to do for me at all. It was just, a couple of invitations came in, and I need to try to find a way to somehow pay the bills, and kind of, I thought, okay, I can work like a garage band, you know, with getting gigs, right? That's sort of how I still see it. And not terribly lucrative, and actually pretty difficult in a lot of ways, but what's been fulfilling about it is that I find the type of community that's built online is real, but it's about a potential for something else. And for me, a lot of things that have mattered most that have come out of this little Nein project have come through getting some people in the room and then getting to know them differently, and often figuring out sort of what it is that people care about and are working on. And because of the reach, essentially, it's sort of, oh, you're working on this media project or this art thing. You know, someone 3 towns ago is doing something like that. But that's something that I actually would not have known simply from my life online. But the context that brought us together was that community online. And obviously everyone uses social media differently, but that's been for me why I'm actually most interested now in sort of what we're doing tonight, although I'm still kind of learning how to do it and trying to figure out what it is one can do with it. But it is, in fact, exactly what you're talking about. It gets people in the room, they wouldn't be there otherwise. I do not deny that for a second. I guess I'm simply skeptical sometimes about what type of connections we actually have with each other. I'm certainly not the first to question that or wonder about it. But primarily when it comes to type of collective project organizing over the long term, etc. And because for me, it's sort of my work with theory and whatever was always meant a great deal, but for me, actual political work was very on the ground. It was union organizing work, in which you talked to people and you had arguments with them, and you had terribly long meetings, and this is at this point 10 plus years ago. We know people are not going to come out to a meeting unless you actually talk to them and say, "Can I count on you tomorrow?" Right? And that type of engagement, right? And that's something that I don't want people to lose sight of, and I'm sure that they know. And there are plenty of examples of mass movements that have come about as a result of just organization online. That's true, but it's simply my own. I'm a quasi old person. It's with some sense of what that was like, and some kind of diffuse anxiety about what is happening to that. Is something happening to that? So more complex than anything I can theorize, but plenty of others are doing that work.
We have a question over here. Yeah.
My question is, how do you see the future of Nein? For how long can this format last?
I don't know. I didn't think I'd still be doing it now. I didn't, and for a lot of reasons. One of them is I actually needed more distance from Twitter in order to keep doing it. It's because for me, I've always said, for me personally, Twitter has its price. It's made a lot of things possible, but it's also made some things more difficult for me. And that's why right now. Oh, thank you. Well, that's why right now. All right, I shouldn't hold. Someone take this microphone away from me after I've had this. I would say, but it is on my mind. What I would say is that I've been encouraged to keep doing it, but that sort of surprises me because my assumption is that people would be sick and tired of what I do by now. And because there are things that I've gone tired of, but I also don't do anymore. A lot of what I do online has changed over time. It really used to be a lot of stuff that was very heavily German stuff, or it had to do with the things that I was teaching, or whatever it was. Now it's more about whatever it is I happen to be thinking about, a lot of new stuff, simply because there's always material. There's always something new to write about. And the challenge to me was sort of, okay, you've developed a type of voice through Twitter. What can that voice say now? What can it talk about? And that's the challenge that I like. I think my kind of tools of irony and so on are still pretty crude. There's a lot to learn. There are a lot of subjects I find I'm not very good at working at, because I feel like I just have kind of a sledgehammer right now, and I don't have the precision that I like to have. So I know I want to keep working with the short form. I just don't know what it will be called or where it will be. But it's that's the challenge right now, is essentially to find a way to make it possible to keep experimenting with the short form. I just don't know exactly what it will be. So, but also being on the road is kind of what's probably kept the thing alive longer than anything else would have so far, because it's been a challenge. This is sort of what you saw tonight was actually the result of a lot of missteps. I have had a lot of appearances. There was not much laughter. There was not much anything. Had to learn how to do things very differently over time, and very awkward, and very difficult. And for me, though, it's kind of what I've been trying to do is move in a way a little bit further away from Twitter, so that this isn't just this collection of tweets. The hope is take what it is that you've learned from Twitter to do other things. And essentially that combination of images and setup is kind of the tension that I like to work with in some way. So that is, I know, what interests me the most, but I don't really know what that turns into. I don't necessarily know the genre of a talk like the one I gave tonight. It would actually be helpful for me to have one. That's why I used the word show from the beginning, because I didn't want to say lecture. I didn't want to say any of that, to have that in anticipation. I wanted to start with the idea that it's not exactly clear what he's going to be doing, or how that's going to go. And so for me, I guess right now it's more about trying those things out and deciding if it's something that I can keep pursuing or not. But right now the idea is at least to stick with it until the end of the year. After that, I'm not sure what will come. Thanks for the question.
I don't see any other hands, so I guess I'll finish with the last question, which is, in this project of yours, this experimental project, what has this stay in Pristina for the last 3 days helped you with? Like, has it provoked something in you that, you know, will lead your project into a certain direction?
What can we contribute?
Pristina changed the world.
It's too early to say, except that I'm simply grateful for people's willingness to, or interest in even what I have to say, because I know that I haven't done the work that I should do responsibly do to know about the places where I'm going, because I just don't really have the time to do it, and I'm so distracted. Because right now it's sort of, it's not just a matter of what I'm going to talk about, it's every event there are 20 emails around, and the bookkeeping and the buy plane tickets and stuff. And so, but now I've kind of accepted that, and this has sort of been another example, I suppose, of stepping into a situation where you really don't know much about it. And trying to kind of trust yourself to what can you sort of figure out in a short amount of time. But what I've really enjoyed here most is the number of people I've talked to who have been very willing to explain things to me in an intelligent but concise way, and for someone who, again, isn't necessarily dumb but is ignorant, right? That's the situation I'm usually in, and here in particular I've found people have been very helpful in that regard. But the other thing, I'm actually quite serious about what I said about the kind of inspiration I see in projects like Hackerspace and so on. Those are always the things that have interested me most, and the most fun about traveling has been, those are usually the places I end up in speaking at, things like that. And those are the most fun, always. And the other thing I was so impressed by here is that none of this was planned, you know, a week and a half ago. This happened in no time. And that I'm impressed by, that's a possibility. And that's something that in fact has kept the thing going for me, has been something can come up in very short time and be a good experience and propels you, keeps you going, you know, to the next stop and see what happens there. But I would say more than anything, it's been the kind of energy that I've sensed here of people who are trying to accomplish something and doing so through hard work, but also with a sense of humor and some kind of a dark sense of humor often, which I really appreciate. I think it's the best kind. And if nothing, that is probably the thing that I'll take with me most. And I think that's what I've really appreciated all throughout the Balkans so far, has been exactly that sense of I don't find anything funny unless I have the sense that people also, in saying it, know just how awful the world is as well. And I think you guys are very good at that. So keep that up. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.